into BlackRock. Now, I don't know if you're aware, but we've talked about BlackRock a couple of times on this show. For those of you who are new, you may not know that. And one of the things I've continued to tell people is that BlackRock is one of the largest, most dangerous companies in the world. Not in the United States, but in the world. And now some of those things that I spoke about before are now being confirmed by people who used to be a part of BlackRock. So if you have not heard, James O'Keefe, he actually started a media company. And what James O'Keefe has done is he's hired a citizen journalist to go out there and to basically expose corruption. This recent story here, BlackRock recruiter who decides people's fate spills info on the company's world impact. So this is just another piece here that proves what I've been saying to you before. We're going to go into this clip here, and then I have two other clips I want to show you why you need to be concerned about BlackRock. So this gentleman here says he was a recruiter of BlackRock. Listen to this.
They don't want to be in the news. They don't want people to talk about them. They don't want to be anywhere on the radar.
Why not?
I don't know, but I suspect it's probably because it's easier to do things when people aren't thinking about it. All of these financial institutions, they buy politicians.
So one thing that he said there that I think is clear is that they don't want to be in the news. They don't want to be talked about. You ever notice you rarely hear about BlackRock being mentioned in the news? You'll hear Disney. You'll hear about Time Warner, all these other larger companies, but you rarely hear them mention BlackRock or Vanguard Group or State Street Corporation. There's a reason for that. They don't want you to know too much about them. Now, he goes on to say that these companies buy politicians, which is what we've been talking about before.
You can take this big ton of money, and then you can start to buy people. I work for a company called BlackRock.
Meet Serge Varley, a recruiter at BlackRock.
Let me tell you, it's not who's the president. It's who's controlling the wallet.
This piece right here. Let me tell you, it's not who the president is. It's who's controlling the wallet of the president. Remember, we've talked about that pyramid I showed you before, where when you look at political officials, they are not at the top of that pyramid. They're actually in the middle. They're just puppets of banks and corporations and people that are CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. Those industries are actually higher than the politicians. They're the ones that control the money.
So it's
And who's that?
the hedge funds, BlackRock, the banks. These guys want campaign financing. Yep, you can buy your candidates. And obviously, we have the system in place. First, there's the senators. And these guys are rich. You got 10 grand, you can buy a senator.
You got 10 grand, you can buy a senator.
Give me 500K right now, no questions asked.
Yeah.
I did it too, it's done.
Does like everybody do that? Does BlackRock do that?
It doesn't matter who wins.
You're so good.
They're my pocket at this point.
This is exactly why I continue to tell you to follow the money. This is why. And some people say, oh, but that's the way it's always done. Politicians always took corporate money. No, not always. Remember, super PACs and PACs didn't always exist. Ralph Nader has talked about this before. The game changed in politics when those were introduced. Everything changed after that. Let's go back in.
Here's Serge Varley on how good war is for BlackRock's business.
Do you have any thoughts on the Ukraine-Russia war?
Yeah, I mean, I do have thoughts.
What are they?
Ukraine is good for business. You know that, right?
I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, guys. Sorry. I think it's just a little. Oh, I guess I can't. Okay, it is what it is. Sorry.
To give an example, Russia blows up Ukraine's grain silos. Price of wheat's gonna go mad up. Ukrainian economy is tied very largely to the wheat market, global wheat market. Prices of bread, literally everything it goes up and down. This is fantastic if you're trading. Volatility creates opportunity to make profit. War is real good for business. It's exciting when goes wrong, right? BlackRock manages 20 trillion. It's incomprehensible numbers.
Let me pause here for a second, and I just want to tell you, so this war with Ukraine, what have we told you? War is all about profit. That's what this all comes down to. They're just trying to make money. They don't care that innocent people die. They don't care that we have to struggle with inflation. They don't care that we have to pay more for gas or for groceries. They don't care. This is all about money. You take away the money, you take away the corruption.
BlackRock Serge Varley says all of this is above a normal person's understanding.
You're like an undercover reporter. I don't know. No people don't give a shit. This is beyond them. The whole thing of like domination from a concept is it's so interesting.
Hi, I'm James O'Keefe with OMG News. Here we are with our latest story, this time on BlackRock, one of the world's leading asset and investment managers, which owns significant shares of companies like Amazon, Microsoft, Anheuser-Busch, Meta, Target, Procter & Gamble, Comcast, CNN, Fox, and yes, Pfizer.
And this is exactly why, if you want to boycott Amazon, you have to go a step above that. This is what I was trying to tell people. Boycotting Amazon, you're not really getting to the root of the problem. If you boycott Comcast, you're not really getting to the root of the problem. The root of the problem is BlackRock. That's who you have to really hit. They own so much, you guys. One of the most largest, profitable, and dangerous countries in the world. And most people that you talk to probably have never even heard of them. And that's the way that they like it.
Just to name a few. At OMG, we do not shy away from exposing powerful companies, and we're not afraid of powerful people. So we decided to take a look for ourselves at the influence BlackRock has on our politics and the influence they have on our culture. So to do that, what better place to start a hidden camera investigation than into a self-described gatekeeper at BlackRock?
Like, you're kind of like a fucking gatekeeper at BlackRock.
Yeah, I am. I decide people's fates. Every fucking day, I literally decide how somebody's life is going to be shaped.
That's so powerful. I love it.
Yeah, it's I don't know, the whole thing of like domination from a concept is it's so interesting.
Introducing Serge Varley, whose LinkedIn says he's worked for Morgan Stanley, Citadel, and now as a recruiter at BlackRock.
I looked up his LinkedIn, by the way, and I couldn't find him. So maybe he has either made it private or he has deleted it after this was released. I don't know, but I could not find him on LinkedIn. Let me know if you could.
I work for a company called BlackRock. I'm not actually a finance guy. I know what happens because I'm recruiting people who do these things. Mm-hmm. I'm the person who headhunts people from other firms. So I would approach you and be like, hey, this is a good reason why you should come to work for us.
Serge tells us who really runs the world, how they do it, and just how much it costs to buy people, like politicians.
Let me tell you, it's not through who's the president. It's who's controlling the wallet. So it's
And who's that?
the hedge funds, BlackRock, the banks. These guys run campaign financing. Yep, you can buy your candidates.
How so?
All of these financial institutions, they buy politicians.
How do they run the world?
You acquire stuff. You diversify, you acquire, you keep acquiring, you spend whatever you make in acquiring more. And at a certain point, your risk level is super low. Like, imagine you've invested in like 10 different industries, from food to drinks to like technology, right? One of them fails, it doesn't matter. You have 9 others to back you up. Risk.
That's the big part. I'm going to show you a video clip that actually shows you what that looks like in pictures, so you can see that with BlackRock. But that's the thing. That's why I said if you boycott one company, it doesn't matter because they have all those others. How do you boycott a company like BlackRock? That's really difficult to do. But if you talk to most people, you need to ask yourself, why is it that most people don't even know that this company exists? Why is it that most people have never heard of Larry Fink, but they know Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos? As I said before, those people are the obvious rich people. You need to focus on the people that are rich that are not as obvious, and then ask yourself why that is. There's a reason why these people don't want to be seen.
Management is inherently just about everything, and in the finance space, it's all about it's all about the money you make. You don't let it sit. You keep using it over and over, and
Reinvest.
Yeah, and it exponential growth.
And then once you just own a little bit of everything, is that where the control?
Yeah. You own a little bit of everything, and that little bit of everything gives you so much money on a yearly basis that you can take this big ton of money, and then you can start to buy people. Obviously, we have this system in place. First, there's the senators, and these guys are cheap. You got 10 grand, you can buy a senator. It doesn't matter who wins.
You're still right.
They're in my pocket at this point. I could give you 500K right now, no questions asked.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do what needs to be done. They're like, yeah, of course.
And
why not?
does everybody do that? Does BlackRock do that?
The BlackRock recruiter also tells us about how the U.S. government relies on BlackRock for their economic simulation computational power.
Economic simulation. They need to understand the impact of something, right? They're gonna raise the interest rate, for example. It's gonna create this cascade of various factors that people they're not sure what it's gonna do, basically.
And just how fucking great the Ukraine war is for business.
Do you have any thoughts on the Ukraine-Russia war?
Ukraine is good for business. You know, right? We don't want the conflict to end.
Why?
We do not want the conflict to end. Now, that was revealed in those Pentagon document leaks. Remember that 21-year-old kid that they hauled away? That was leaked in those Pentagon documents. One of the things that he found was that there was actually no intention for the U.S. government to even call for an end or peace in reference to this war because of the profit-driven margin. And that's what this is really about.
We don't want the conflict to end as a country. The longer this goes on, the weaker Russia is. I'll give an example. Russia blows up Ukraine's grain silos. The price of wheat's gonna go mad up. So what are you gonna do if you're a trading firm? The moment that news hits, within a millisecond, you're gonna pump trades into whoever the wheat suppliers are, into their stocks. Within an hour or two, that stock goes up, and then you sell, and you just made, I don't know, however many mil.
Why would a news channel promote a side in war?
Because it's also good for business too. I mean, what's news? News, right? What does news feed on? They feed on strategy, they feed on up events.
Right. These news channels like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, etc., they don't get their ratings for talking about good things and positive things. They're not bringing you good news or positive news. But when there is war, that is a chance for their ratings to increase. It also is a chance for them to control the narrative, especially in America, of the American people, to get you to pick a side. Meanwhile, we're all being played like puppets. We're all being played. So the media, of course, we knew this. They were in on this as well. But it's also profitable for them too. So if you have a company like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street Corporation, and they are shareholders of these media networks like CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, if they're shareholders, every time that network makes money, they also make money. Every time these wars continue to start, that's more money for them. It's just one giant circle of rotating money. And meanwhile, you have people in this country that can't even afford a medical bill. Let that sink in.
That's what people like to watch. So when it happens, it's good business. More viewers. When nothing's happening, watch the news. I don't watch news.
So they're all pushing like the same talking point. Like you generally, when you look at news, like
It's propaganda. Ukrainian economy is tied very largely to the wheat market, global wheat market. This is fantastic if you're trading. Volatility creates opportunity to make profit. War is real good for business. It's exciting when goes wrong, right?
All right. And then it goes into repeats there. Now, I want to show you what this actually looks like because I've talked about this before, but I want to actually, let's start with the most powerful company in the world. We'll start with this video first. They own everything. Everyone needs to see this clip here. It's called They Own Everything, the most powerful company in the world.
We've kind of gotten used to BlackRock beating the numbers, beating expectations.
BlackRock is by far the largest with roughly a 35% market share of domestic market.
Who is the most powerful man in the world? Some may say it is the President of the United States. Others may side with corporate America and deem the likes of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk to be more powerful. But there is someone else. It is likely you have never heard of BlackRock. In less than 30 years, this company has grown from nothing to becoming the world's largest asset manager. The assets in the roster exceed the value of $9 trillion, and their net worth is equal to half of America's GDP. Clearly, they do not need a name in the mainstream media to be successful, or, in fact, own and control the entire world. But who are they? What do they do? And how does this one company in America influence every industry and sector in the world? Let's begin with who they are. BlackRock was founded in 1988 by Larry Fink, along with Robert Capito, Susan Wagner, Barbara Novick, Ben Golub, Hugh Frater, Ralph Schlosstein, and Keith Anderson. Its aim was to provide corporations with asset management services to help them manage their risks and investments. The idea came when Fink, during his time in First Boston, lost $100 million as its head. That experience became the motivation for him to develop what he and the others considered to be excellent risk management and fiduciary practices. BlackRock first got its funding from Pete Peterson of the Blackstone Group, who believed in Fink's vision of a firm devoted to risk management. Fink's company then essentially became an arm of Blackstone, and it was called Blackstone Financial Management. In exchange for a 50% stake in the bond business, Blackstone gave Fink and his team a $5 million credit line. Within
Blackstone is pretty, you need to keep your eye on Blackstone too. They're not as powerful as BlackRock, but you need to keep your eye on that one as well.
In months, the business turned profitable. And by 1989, the group's assets had quadrupled to $2.7 billion. Blackstone's stake in Fink's company then fell to just 40%, as opposed to the 60% held by Fink and his group. The firm adopted the name BlackRock in 1992, and by the end of that year, BlackRock was managing $17 billion in assets. By the end of 1994, they were handling $53 billion. Sometime later that same year, Fink became the chairman and CEO of BlackRock Inc. The company went public in 1999 at just $14 a share on the New York Stock Exchange. And by the end of that year, they were handling $165 billion in assets. BlackRock grew both organically and by acquisitions, and in 2004, they made their first significant acquisition, buying State Street Research and Management's holding company, SSRM Holding Inc., from MetLife for $325 million in cash and $50 million in stock. And
they're basically, like Eric said, they're basically just making money off of money. This is basically what they're doing.
this was only the beginning. We are aware, to some extent, that a handful of mega corporations and private investment companies dominate every aspect of our lives. What we watch, eat, drink, wear, buy, and go is all dictated. It is all less of a personal choice and more what is fed to us by corporations. All of these investment firms are so enormous that they control the money flow worldwide. While there appear to be hundreds of competing brands on the market, the truth is, larger parent companies actually own multiple smaller brands, like Russian nesting dolls. PepsiCo, for example, owns a long list of food, beverage, and snack brands. As
this part right here, this is why when I talk about boycotts, this is what people need to understand. PepsiCo, for example, they own...
PepsiCo, for example, owns a long list of food,
You see this? Ruffles, Cheetos, there's the Starbucks little Frappuccino drink, Quaker Oats, like they own so much stuff. So if you say that you're going to, you know what? Ruffles pissed me off, damn it. I'm going to boycott, what is that, General Mills? I'm going to boycott General Mills, okay? But you would really need to boycott PepsiCo. And then you need to look at and see who owns PepsiCo. This is why boycotting can be so tough.
Beverage and snack brands, as does Coca-Cola, Nestle, General Mills, Unilever, Mars, Kraft Heinz, and Associated British Foods. Together, these parent companies monopolize the packaged food industry, as virtually every food brand available belongs to one of them. These companies are publicly traded and are run by boards, where the largest shareholders have power over the decision-making. And here is where it gets interesting, because when you look up who the largest shareholders are, you find yet another monopoly. While the topmost shareholders can change from time to time based on shares bought and sold, two companies are consistently listed among the top institutional holders of these parent companies: the Vanguard Group Inc. and BlackRock Inc.
So this is the other company I was telling you about, the Vanguard Group. They're another one. They're a large shareholder. You'll usually see Vanguard Group and BlackRock next to each other. If you look up different companies and you look up who their shareholders are, you'll usually see those two right next to each other. Sometimes State Street Corporation is also up in like that top 5 in reference to those shareholders. But these two right here, and they're dangerous to the American people as well, because they also buy up homes. We're going to get to that in just a little bit.
The same ownership trend exists in industries besides food and beverage. If you're planning a family vacation and using your laptop, phone, or tablet to research ticket prices and hotel stay, your go-to would probably be a site like Skyscanner, Booking.com, Airbnb, or Expedia, which provides you with all the information you need in one convenient place. Well, both of these companies are owned by BlackRock.
Boom. How many of you knew that? And when I first saw this video, I thought to myself, like, damn, I always used Booking.com. How many of you use Booking.com or Expedia or Airbnb? You see the problem? They own so much.
You book your vacation and are set to fly, most likely with American Airlines, Air France, KLM, United Airlines, Delta, or Transavia, all of which BlackRock has a stake in. Even if you are not flying with any of these airlines, BlackRock still owns a percentage of Boeing and Airbus, two of the largest aircraft manufacturers in the world. If you arrive at your hotel and choose to write a review of your stay on TripAdvisor, you would be using a service also partly owned by BlackRock. And their power goes much further. The kerosene that fuels the plane comes from one of their many oil companies and refineries, and the steel that makes the plane also comes from their mines. The agricultural sector is not exempt from this either. BlackRock owns Bayer, the world's largest seed producer, along with some of the largest textile manufacturing plants and clothing companies. In addition to that, BlackRock has a stake in solar panel producing companies, major drug companies, and the scientific institutes and labs that fund drug studies. Places where you shop, from malls and department stores to Amazon and AliExpress, are owned by BlackRock. If you choose not to shop with them and support smaller local businesses, you are still supporting BlackRock when you use your credit card or any digital mode of payment to pay for your goods and services. Insurance companies, banks, construction companies, telephone companies, restaurants, personal care brands, and makeup brands are all in their sizable portfolio. In virtually every major company, you find BlackRock among the top 10 institutional investors. With its massive reach, BlackRock is essentially the fourth branch of government, influencing policies and decisions and even lending money to the central bank and Federal Reserve.
In past times of crisis, the Federal Reserve System has asked BlackRock for help managing funds.
But it's not abnormal for the Fed to be buying services from companies.
The 2008 financial crisis had the New York Federal Reserve leader Timothy Geithner ask BlackRock for help to manage the distressed assets Bear Stearns and AIG. In an echo of 2008, the Fed once again relied on BlackRock to stabilize the bond market amid the economic turmoil caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The details of the arrangement were not revealed, including how much BlackRock would be paid for their services. But it was undoubtedly a lucrative undertaking for the company. Not to mention that they would also be in a position to profit from the advice they gave.
In the following months, the central bank purchased trillions of dollars in various assets and debts, including corporate bonds. BlackRock was tapped to manage this portion of the purchases.
BlackRock, of course, has used the central bank and the Fed's dependence on them to grow even further. This power has allowed Larry Fink to become a billionaire oligarch, holding incredible power, not just in America, but all over the world.
Now, can you imagine why, and we'll go to the next clip because that one's kind of long. Can you imagine why they would not want a politician who is running on, let's get rid of the billionaires or let's tax the rich more? Can you imagine why the media would be against them? The networks, the newspapers. Look who owns it. When you talk about getting rid of the billionaires, you're talking about getting rid of Larry Fink. He don't want that. When you talk about taxing the rich, you're talking about taxing Larry Fink. So they're never going to, so the media, the mainstream media is never going to be in favor of that type of candidate. That's what people have to understand. Now I want to show you why they may try to own your house in 5 years. Now people need to see this part about BlackRock as well.
The housing market is in shambles. In the US alone, 70% of people who want to buy a home can't even afford to anymore. In the UK, home affordability is at its worst point since the 19th century, and it's not hard to see why. In just 2 generations, house prices have doubled relative to inflation, whilst wages have stagnated below the inflation line. Mortgage rates have also climbed significantly in recent months to 6.7%, pushing homeownership further into the realm of fantasy. And if that's not bad enough, people who don't own homes are being squeezed for every last penny by skyrocketing rents. Rents that are expected to go up by over 8% this year on average. And it's even worse in the big cities. That's why in San Francisco, you can now rent a bed in a dorm room for the low price of $1,200 a month. Not a flat, not even a room, just a bed. That's why you can rent a cupboard under the stairs for literally 500 quid a month in London. Add in all the other pressures of the cost of living crisis and you get a recipe for disaster. But this isn't just the product of historical trends and generational economic pressures. The problem has been made measurably worse by a small collection of companies. A collection of companies you may never have heard of. Companies like Vanguard, Blackstone, the UBS Group, and BlackRock. By buying up $60 billion worth of the housing market, they've brought the entire system to the brink of collapse. And here's exactly how they did it. You see, right now, Wall Street is getting deep into single-family homes. Companies like Vanguard and BlackRock oversee trillions of dollars on behalf of their clients, putting it wherever they think will make the most money. And one of these is the housing market. Using their immense purchasing power, these trillion-dollar companies have the ability to price out regular people with ease, sometimes offering 50% over the asking price just hours after the houses are being listed. In 2022, nearly a quarter of the homes put on the market weren't bought by the families that needed them, but instead by institutional investors. That's nearly double the 12% it was last year.
And this is part of the reason why some people who are millennials and Gen Z have difficulty trying to buy a home now. Because instead of families buying those homes, before they even get a chance to do so, companies like BlackRock and Vanguard are buying those homes, renovating those homes, increasing the price, and renting them out. I truly believe they want us to be forever renters. I really do think that's part of the goal of some of these companies like BlackRock and Vanguard. They don't want you to own anything. They want you to be a forever renter. So keep that in mind. This goes all the way back to the housing crisis in 08, when those homes that the banks foreclosed on, the homes that were stolen from people, when those homes were foreclosed on, someone had to buy them, right? You would think a family or someone would show up and say, I want to buy this house. No. BlackRock bought those homes, renovated them, increased the price, rented them out. Because you see, as long as you continue to have renters, the dollar continues to turn. If you let someone buy the house and eventually they pay off the mortgage, that dollar is not continuing to turn anymore once they pay off that mortgage. You get what I'm coming from? So they want to make you a forever renter. Let's go on.
However, 15 years ago, this wasn't happening at all. With very few exceptions, Wall Street stayed entirely separate from these homes. Instead, they bet their billions on mortgage bonds, financial products that gave returns based on regular people paying their mortgages. So then what changed here? What happened? Well, it all started when the bank's beloved mortgage bonds dropped sharply in value after a housing market crash, putting the whole world into a financial crisis. You see, because the banks had leveraged so much money on housing going up, it was catastrophic when they didn't. Some of the world's biggest banks like Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers went straight into the ground, with government bailouts eventually costing taxpayers billions. And this disaster sent ripples throughout the entire global economy, leading to one of the biggest economic crashes in modern history.
It was the worst day on Wall Street since the crash of 1987.
From the financial capital of the world, the opening bell is going to ring in 5 seconds, and to be honest with you, we wish it wouldn't.
Meanwhile, hundreds of thousands of families lost their homes in carnage over the next few years as housing prices continued to fall. But Wall Street, who were almost entirely to blame for the crisis, saw an opportunity. One company that made their name from the crisis was BlackRock. You see, BlackRock was hired by the US government to oversee massive amounts of money and assets that were left behind by the crisis. Using this money and the connections they brought with them, BlackRock became a multi-trillion-dollar giant. Other companies went down a different path. Instead of putting money into mortgage bonds and profiting from the housing market that way, they could make a fortune by buying the houses outright. After all, the massive amount of foreclosures meant that tons of homes were being sold cheap and there still wasn't enough demand.
You have to come up with a down payment, right? So what are you going to do if you're the person if you're the bank trying to sell the house? Is it easier for you to sell the house to someone who's looking for a starter home and they're putting down a down payment? Or is it easier for you to sell that house to a company that can pay for it outright? I'll let you decide which option they chose.
Houses being bought would give a stagnant housing market the boost it needed, so the government stepped in and offered these institutional investors a way to fill the gap, giving them almost exclusive access to hundreds of thousands of foreclosed homes. Some of these were sold for as little as $50,000 or $60,000, but most hovered around the $100,000 to $150,000 range. And years later, this would prove to be a catastrophic mistake. Lots of the first homes that were under the hammer were dilapidated and needed expensive renovations before people could feasibly live in them. The idea was that companies that bought them would get them up to spec, then lease them to families in need. Over time, the families could put more money into buying back the home, eventually leading to homeownership. However, the flaw in the plan was trusting that all the Wall Street investors weren't going to abuse the system, like they did just a few years before. And once the floodgates were open, billions in Wall Street money went towards buying these foreclosed homes. And so within a period of 6 years, $36 billion of Wall Street money went into buying over 200,000 foreclosed homes. Immediately, a new financial industry sprung up overnight. Thousands of companies were created to take advantage of the gold rush, buying up these cheap houses thousands at a time. The largest was a company called Invitation Homes, who owned over 80,000 single-family homes at their height, eventually being incorporated into Blackstone, an investment giant with nearly $1 trillion of assets under their control. But what was there to be gained? Well, whilst the tenants covered the actual mortgage costs, these Wall Street companies made money on the actual value of the house. Just a few short years later, and a bounce back in house prices made these already discounted investments incredibly profitable. What's more, the homes could be used as equity to secure loans, letting these companies gain millions more to invest in whatever they wanted. This would often end up being more single-family homes, unsurprisingly. However, one problem was immediately apparent to anyone who ended up renting these homes. These massive financial companies were awful landlords. The days of an understanding and beneficial relationship between two local people were gone. Instead, the victims of the crash were often left paying rent on houses they used to own to a mishmash of shell companies and firms that were located hundreds of thousands of miles away.
And if you're renting the house and you don't own it, if something breaks, you're supposed to have a landlord that is supposed to fix those things, right? But in these situations, oftentimes they were absent. So this is why, by the way, another little bit of tidbit advice I want to give you as well. I had 2 friends that did this and it did not work out well. Be very cautious about rent to own. Okay. If you can afford to do so, please have a lawyer look over that type of agreement, because I've had 2 friends that have done rent to own houses and it was not what they thought it was. So just be very careful about that. If it sounds too good to be too good to be true in real estate, usually it probably is.
When they bought the homes, the bare minimum in repair and renovation costs was paid. As long as they were presentable at the first viewing, it really didn't matter what the long-term problems were. Although a few years later, and the returns were drying up as the market stabilized, and this meant that the companies who now own the houses needed to cut their costs in other ways. And so this would involve firing some of the support staff, increasing rents by a predatory amount, and pushing more responsibilities onto renters. Things that used to be the landlord's responsibility, like repairs and keeping the house livable, were suddenly added to new contracts. If the renters didn't sign, then they were often evicted. And the bottom line is that this was a huge shift of capital from regular working people to Wall Street millionaires and billionaires.
And that's what I want to leave you with there, that this was a shift of capital from everyday people like you and me to Wall Street and to billionaires. And that's what I want you to focus on. So even if they evict those renters, it doesn't matter. They'll find another set of renters to come in like the next day. This is why I continue to tell you, when people say we have a shortage of housing, there is no shortage of housing, people. The houses are there. They've just made it so companies like BlackRock have made it so that you can't afford to live in it. And if anyone who's a candidate, that's how you need to talk about that issue, the housing issue. Thank you for the super sticker, Solomon. Thank you, Jared. Some people are excited about China trying to make a multipolar world, but how do you feel about their business imperialism in Africa? I talked to Danny Haifong about that when he came on last time, about the business that like China has like with Africa. He had a different perspective on that it was, some people feel like it is in Africa, feel like it's welcome. Some people feel like it's not. But I recommend watching that interview because Danny can explain that a lot better than I can. Chicago, he took his picture down from all his profiles. Yeah, I could not find that guy's LinkedIn page like after I saw that video. Thank you, Mary. So basically, we are locked out of any decisions as a society to make on any company in our country. We're screwed. I wouldn't even say like in our country, because this is the entire world. Like BlackRock is one of the largest, most dangerous companies in the world. That's how big they are. And thank you for this, Mary. You will own nothing and be happy. That is what they say, right? Thank you, Turbo. It's sad that they don't need to do this and they aim to live in a miserable, sad world. They think it's funny and do it to feed their empty, sad lives. It is true. It's not like these people need this money. It's not like Larry Fink needs more money. You know, it's a power structure here. And thank you for this as well. Real estate can't be for investment. It has to be for living in. Thank you for that, Turbo. Well. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, old geologist. Interesting name.